Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to everybody's favorite game, Are They Omega? What? That's already a... Oh. Okay, I mean, are they an Omega level mutant? Specificity is important. If you've never heard of an Omega level mutant, I envy you. It is a thing in the comics, but it almost exclusively is discussed in power scaling, which is essentially my dad could beat up your dad, but with more crying on the internet. Now, this is going to be a bit more difficult than are they a mutant, because a mutant is a real thing, at least in the context of the Marvel Universe, whereas Omega level is always made up no matter what universe. We first hear it when the villain Nimrod, actual name, looks up Rachel Summers on his little bigot Pokédex, and it classifies her as an Omega class mutant, and warns that the upper limit of her abilities has yet to be determined. Not that she didn't have one or was a god or anything, just exercise caution because we don't know what we're dealing with. Then everyone lost their damn minds. Greek life came to Xavier's and letters started flying everywhere. We had alphas and betas and omegas and Omega level threats and Omega level minds. This dude is called an Omega level monster, and none of it meant anything. Sure, they threw around definitions. Some Fed named Fred told Xavier it meant unlimited potential, but it was basically just a way to show that a character was special and powerful. Two things that everybody wants their favorite superhero to be. So if you got any amount of page time, odds are someone would call you an Omega eventually. Like Omega Red, the death gas guy, who I assume qualified for the obvious reasons, his tentacles. Not to mention the beyond Omega level mutants who were so special and powerful that they had unlimited potential. Matthew Malloy was basically God, but also doesn't exist because they went back and made sure his parents never met. Not a joke. There's also Nate Gray, the alternate universe version of Cable, that dared to show how much hotter he'd be if he really leaned into the whole Marvel Jesus bit. But luckily, none of that matters. The Lycaon Age saw mutants trying to build a home for themselves, but they had to get their shit together first. So the characters finally came together and decided Omega level mutants were those who not only had powers with undefinable limits, but who could reach them. It's not enough to just be the best at what you do. Forge has the power to intuitively invent basically anything, but he doesn't count because it's still hypothetically possible for someone else to be better. Don't worry though, Marvel finally realized that a not so small percentage of their fan base were greedy little rankophiles and provided a complete, comprehensive canon list of everyone who qualified, and one who didn't, just for vibes. Before we begin, let's discuss some names that don't appear on this list, just to try and beat the comment. Charles Xavier is routinely called the greatest telepath on Earth. Didn't make the cut. Sorry, Baldy, that's called downsizing. If it makes you feel better, though, neither did Rachel Summers. Nor Darwin, the boy who can adapt to anything. Feels Omega-y, right? Maybe if he didn't literally have to be on the brink of dying for his power to kick in, you'd have a better shot. And you may have heard that Gambit got experimental brain surgery to reduce his power level, which is genuinely true. You know what they say, with less power comes less responsibility. And when he got it reversed, it definitely seemed like he could be in contention, but then he burned all the extra power off anyway, so he's not on the list. Before anyone gets mad about any of that, let's remind ourselves of the level we're really playing at. I don't think it'll surprise anyone to learn that the Master of Magnetism and the Weather Goddess are Omega level, but it's not their complete control over their element that makes them stand out. It's the wackadoodle shit. Sure, Magneto can flip the Earth's poles and strip Wolverine in the least sexy way possible, yeah, but what puts him over the top is the flying wormholes and entrancement? Meanwhile, Storm makes tsunamis and hurricanes that span the Earth, but also commands space wind and can repolarize the molecules of her clothing for quick changes. If the sky's the limit, you aren't thinking high enough. Literally. Magneto threw enough iron into Mars's core to basically turn it back on and fix its gravity, then Storm created an entire atmosphere. That is the league we're talking about. Now, to be clear, Mags and Stormy didn't do the Mars thing all on their own. They had a lot of help from other people on the list, including Bobby Drake, aka Iceman, who made ice. It sounds fancier if you say he gave a dead planet ice caps, but still. On one hand, his qualifying makes total sense, because he's an original X-Man and he's been doing wackadoodle shit for years. But on the other hand, he did used to explicitly be one of the weakest team members. It took Emma Frost taking over his body in the 90s for anyone to even see his potential. Not to mention, he's listed under thermal manipulation negative. And I just do not see how that is anything other than a limit. Even ignoring Absolute Zero, because yeah, it's a comic book, you would expect the Omega level heat guy to go both directions, wouldn't you? Right, Cyclops' other annoying younger brother. Vulcan was the only Summers kid born after their parents were abducted by aliens. As such, he was taken from his mother and placed in an incubation tube that aged him up in time to serve on the second secret X-Men team that all died. In the same series he's introduced in, he's described as at least Omega, past Omega, and way past Omega. But we don't have to worry about any of that because now he is solidly just Omega. That is the magic of the list. His thing is energy control. Technically all types, kinetic, psionic, cosmic, magic. But at the end of the day, it's all about shooting fire out of your hands, isn't it? Speaking of fire, everyone knows you can't throw a rock on Krakoa without hitting a telepath. But if you're competing for limited spots with a girl who can drive people insane by just giving them a glimpse of her power, probably best to temper expectations. Jean is so powerful that the most notable part of her inclusion is that it's only for telepathy. Which is a bit funny because in her earliest appearances, she couldn't even do that, though that is before the giant holy space bird. Yeah, you know the Phoenix, cosmic representation of all life and the synergy of mutant kind? That's her. She's also its host and its mom, which means she's able to do genuinely insane things, like eat stars, seize the mind of every single person at the Hellfire Gala, and, most recently, turn Gore the God Butcher into a star. Sort of a take one, leave one situation, I guess. On the flip side, Kid Omega seems to have perfected the Omega Red strat. Quintavious Quirinius Quire, otherwise known as Kid Omega, is, to put it simply, the worst. He's perhaps best known for his ironic t-shirts, the riot he threw at Xavier's, and getting the most brutal rejection possible. Whereas Jean prefers to use her powers in a wipe your mind so clean you fall asleep way, Quentin prefers the subtler approach of psychic guns, or swords, or tanks, or literally anything else. He's like a lost incel Pink Lantern, but to be fair, in recent years he has gotten marginally better. In Krakoa, he served on X-Force and even started dating one of the girls that rejected him. So that's one growth and one horrible backslide. Though he is also only listed as a telepath, because the one true Omega level telekinetic is... yeah, Exodus! You know him, right? He's purple. Originally a crusader from the Crusades, he grew disillusioned with Christianity and started to follow mutant leaders pretty religiously. He allowed himself to be transformed by Apocalypse, became a dedicated acolyte of Magneto, and even had a pretty impressive redemption arc on Krakoa, where he built a new religion worshipping Hope Summers, much to her continued annoyance. But joke's on her, she did kind of sort of turn out to be the Messiah, and he was super right. Even got lost in the desert for a while. It was basically everything he ever wanted, just with less dead humans. Compromise is important. As a telekinetic, his main feats are basically just demolishing or rebuilding very large things, though he did once reconstruct Xavier's brain atom by atom, which is rebuilding a very small thing, so neater. If you didn't know Exodus, I'm willing to bet you probably don't know Absalom Mercator, aka Mr. M, and that's okay. He's only been in like 15 comics and doesn't come out for team bonding activities like terraforming planets. Instead, he visited a kingdom in the magical dimension of Otherworld, eliminated all of the inhabitants, and renamed it after himself to just sorta vibe. I don't think he even set foot on Krakoa. He didn't even swing by when they had a whole battle for the fate of the island in Otherworld. The only time he appears is to help resurrect Gambit, which makes him my 48th most favorite character of all time. His power is matter manipulation. Basically, if it's a thing that exists physically, he can adjust it on a molecular level, which he uses to do all of the obvious things, but also to kill by removing air, suppress other mutants' X genes, and make little nuclear bombs right in his palm. The only thing he can't affect is the vague idea of reality, which is good, because we already have 3 of those, and one of them also rules a kingdom in Otherworld. Jamie Braddock is the older brother of Brian Braddock, aka Captain Britain, and Betsy Braddock, aka Captain Britain. Wanting to join in on the family business without any of the pesky helping people, he became the king of Avalon. Yes, like that Avalon. He had Morgan Le Fay chained up in his basement. It was wild. He is listed as a quantum reality manipulator, which makes sense. He perceives the world as a series of strings that he can pluck and play to his heart's delight. As you would expect, he can do basically anything, including growing an ocean, literally birthing a space station, and creating an intergalactic port with a wave of his hand. And that's just the Mars stuff. Yeah, you see the little red line here? That's what we call just in case. The son of Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman, Franklin was always a vaguely powerful child. His parents thought that maybe it had to do with all that cosmic radiation they were exposed to, but nope, he was a mutant. Except double nope, it was a cosmic thing. He was just warping reality to make it seem like he was a mutant. That revelation came when all the powers went bye-bye, and suddenly he no longer possessed an X gene or anything at all. Even the Krakoan gates stopped working for him. Unless, triple nope. Maybe. He does still have powers, but hides them, except for one day. But also, they may still be cosmic, but also maybe he could use them to pretend to be a mutant again. Congrats, Frankie. You managed to be the most complicated person on a list of mutants. Perhaps I spoke too soon. How do I explain Proteus? His mother is Moira McTaggart, a mutant who Groundhog Days the entire universe every time she dies. Honestly, she might be Omega level herself, but because the list was in universe and her power was a secret, it's hard to tell. Anyways, Moira is a Nobel Prize-winning geneticist and the Grand Architect of Krakoa, who maybe sorta made sure to have a reality warper son on purpose. Because she knew that she'd need one for Krakoa's key component, resurrection. 5 mutants merging their powers to bring back all the rest. Only apparently she didn't plan on said reality warper being an immensely powerful energy being who possessed other people's bodies and turned them into raisins. In her defense, that is hard to fit in a Punnett square. She kept him in a homemade prison and once he escaped, was fully willing to shoot him in the head. Yet people were surprised when it was revealed she wasn't a super upstanding individual. At least Proteus got to enjoy his mother's life's work because on Krakoa he got a steady supply of empty bodies he could possess, and just for flavor, they were all Charles Xavier. So at least his body got to feel Omega level power inside of it. The way the 5 basically worked is that a mutant named Egg, would make a gold ball, no, a non-viable egg, and then Proteus would warp reality to make it an egg. A viable one, I mean. From there, stored mutant DNA was injected and a body started to form. A woman named Tempest used her time control powers to age it appropriately, and Elixir straight up brought it to life. Yeah, literal golden boy Josh here used to be part of the anti-mutant group, the Reavers. Only surprise, surprise, the leopards tried to eat his face and he switched sides. His power is essentially healing, but because we're nothing if not pretentious, is referred to as biokinesis, which basically means he is the master of life and death. Now, some of you out there are probably saying, wait, you just inject DNA into an egg? That's not resurrection, that's cloning. To which I say, learn how to count to 5. Hope Summers, as alluded to earlier, is the mutant messiah. Our greatest apologies to Nate Gray. She's the daughter of firefighter Louise Spaulding and the Phoenix Force, manifested through Jean Grey. They didn't do anything, don't be gross. It's your classic mother-daughter holy bird that binds them dynamic. She was the first mutant born after Wanda's 3-word tragedy, but was actually raised in the future by Cable because he had to be involved somehow. Her technical power is being able to boost or manipulate other people's powers, but on Krakoa, she was far more useful as the Resurrection secret sauce. Remember that stored DNA I mentioned? Well, that came from Mr. Sinister, and if the name didn't tip you off, yeah, he'd been messing with it the entire time. Only no one noticed until they finally tried to do it without Hope, because only then were they just clones. At a certain point, it's comics. If they say it's Resurrection, it's Resurrection. Last and only least, in the heart of his father, we have everyone's favorite bad boy with daddy issues, Legion. The son of Charles Xavier and Gabby Holler, Legion suffers from a very unique case of dissociative identity disorder. Specifically, he is constantly creating new alter identities, each one with different powers. As per the definition, there is no limit to how many alters David could make or how many powers he can physically have. Hence why he is listed as power manifestation. But that's it, those are the only ones on the list, so if you enjoyed this video, make sure to... What do you mean there's a whole other planet? Do you know how long this video is already? Okay, let's make a long story super short, shall we? You know Apocalypse, the super powerful mutant that Charles Darwin goes to sleep at night wishing he could be? Well, he actually used to live on Krakoa back when it was still called Okara. Except, whoopsies, Okara got split in half, and one side, now called Irako, along with every other mutant there, slipped into a hell dimension. They survived and evolved there for thousands of years until Apocalypse finally succeeded on bringing them back to Earth, but then they didn't like it, so they moved to Mars. That is what that was all about. Whether Apocalypse himself is Omega level isn't clear. He certainly seems like he should be, but he's not on the list. Is that just because he's more Iraqi than Krakoan? Maybe, but no one knew that. So what is clear is that his wife, Genesis, is stronger than him. She's got plant powers like that girl in Sky High. Her hobbies include winning fights with her husband and losing them against Storm. Sort of a gods of earth and sky type thing. Her sister, Isca the Unbeaten, cannot lose at all. Doesn't matter if it's a fight, stacking cups, or a bet. Though the latter seems to suggest a level of unconscious reality warping, as Sunspot uses it to rig the results of a fight she's not in. When there's absolutely no chance of winning, she forcefully switches sides. Then there's the kiddies. Apocalypse and Genesis have 4 little horror shows, who, you guessed it, are the original Horsemen. They start out normal, War and Famine are fire and water benders respectively. Then Death gets a little odder, releasing some sort of mist out of his eye sockets that reduce people to ash. But where we get fully bonkers is Pestilence, who shoots arrows that infect whoever they touch with disease. And then they, in turn, infect whoever they touch. How could that be Omega? Let's talk about it. Interestingly, the Iraqi also use the term Omega level, only there's no way to know if they define it the same way. And personally, I'm not sure they do. This is just conjecture, but it seems like they subscribe to the whole strongest of X power thing, or more specifically, like in order to be an Omega, you have to kill an Omega. My evidence for this? Well, 1, it fits their whole vibe, but 2, we are told that everyone who's ever sat on the Great Ring is an Omega, and the only way to get one of those seats is to take out the butt that's already in it. Conversely, the ring is held in check by a group called the Night Seats, who don't do any gladiator rituals and explicitly have never contained an Omega. But really, it's just because they have some of the craziest and most specific powers I've ever heard. And in the interest of time, let's do a quick lightning round. There's Idyll and Idyll III, both can see the future, nothing weird there. Similarly, Nameless is an Omega level shapeshifter. You can kind of imagine what that might entail, and yes, she copies powers. Lactuca is omniscient, aware of where everything in the entire universe is at all times. She also sings to the universe and manipulates it. Ora Serrata is a giant eyeball, and when she looks at you, you cease to exist. Yeah, Omega level existence erasure. That's what I'm talking about. Lycaon Two Wolves is described as an Omega level Wolverine. What does that mean? I don't know, but maybe a wolf-like creature with 2 heads and some bones sticking out? Sure. Uquesh summons gods. That's his thing. He's dead. They just keep his head around because it's useful in that it summons gods. Lotus Logos creates metal by talking, uses it exclusively to write poetry in the form of daggers. Sobunar has ocean blood, which includes an entire little ecosystem. Xilo is a collection of what I assume are mutant insects, whose power I could not tell you with a gun to my head. It honestly might just be terraforming. Oh, he can also piggyback on people or just fully possess them. Truly, he might just be the Omega bug. If you thought Sinister was bad, imagine what an Omega mutant version of him would be like. Then stop imagining and look at this ugly squid man. His power is being able to rewrite genes with his mind, and he uses it to make the amino fetus, a creature who always hungers but can never eat. Because if he does, then he dissolves into a pack of gremlin creatures who feast on reality itself. Tarn created him in case he ever gets bored of the universe. Anyways, Kobak Neverheld, actual name, is a big monster boy who can shoot spikes like projectiles. And finally, we have Orrdon the Omega, who I can only assume is Arako's answer to Omega Red. He clearly has the same powers as Sam Guthrie, aka Cannonball. However, while Sam is famously nigh invulnerable while blasting, this dude gets taken out with an arrow. The issue with using the Krakoan definition is that it's just that. It's the Krakoan definition. That era is over, and these are comics we're talking about, which means everything is always moving forward. So there's already been some complications. Remember Forge? Well, he built a machine that would let him access the powers he hypothetically would have as an Omega. Honestly, solid workaround. Also Synch, who can mimic other mutants' powers. It was said during Krakoa that he was quickly on the way to becoming an Omega. Did he ever get to that point? Is he close? We don't know. Then, of course, there's Cassandra Nova, Xavier's weird prenatal parasite/twin who appeared in Deadpool and Wolverine and was called an Omega-level mutant. Now, I hesitate to even call her a mutant, but I think we can agree if she is one, then her classification is sort of tied to Charlie's, and therein lies the problem. Because as recently as like a month ago, Charles Xavier is once again being referred to as an Omega level mutant. And that, more than anything, shows the futility of this term. As much as the internet loves it, as much as it is seen as a trump card for any argument, because it is a made-up classification, even in universe, it is always going to be in flux. It's not like retconning that someone isn't a mutant. You don't need a whole song and dance to explain why everyone is wrong. You just need one guy to say, oh, that character? They're more powerful and special than we thought. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like. If you're mad at me for not discussing that one random one-off character you love, then go ahead and comment below. And if you want to see more pedantic rants like this, then go ahead and subscribe.